sustainment is about changing behaviors. And that's difficult. Anybody who has ever tried to start a new good habit or break a bad old habit knows how hard it is to create a new habit.
You're listening to the How Manufacturers Improve podcast, hosted by me, Kirby Sneen with the Manufacturers Alliance. If you've ever wondered how some leaders, change efforts, or manufacturing companies have become so successful, then you're in the right place. In each episode, we cover the successes and lessons learned of industry leaders, and then I break it all down into actionable insights so that you can use them to make improvements. This episode is all about 5S that sticks and features operational excellence leader Gary Olson. Enjoy. Gary, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. It's an honor to have you here. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you about 5S, but not just like generally, but specifically as it relates to how to really make 5S stick.
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's jump right in. So like we were just chatting kind of off mic, getting ready. We were talking about how we knew each other and your background. So I know you really well, but would you bring all the listeners up to speed on your background?
Sure. And I don't remember how far we go back, but it was quite a few years.
I remember the first day I met you.
Okay.
I'll bring that up later.
Okay. Sounds good. I graduated from St. Cloud State, and my first job out of school was actually in service business. It was actually in the oil industry. And I was hired as an engineer, and I worked for an electric wireline logging and perforating company. And so my first 6 years out of school, I worked 4 years in Texas and 2 years in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. And so that was a great job. I loved the work, but it wasn't very conducive to a young family. So that's when I left and I went to work for Anderson Windows. And actually, they moved me from Anchorage, Alaska to New Jersey because I took a job in the field. And so I worked there for 3 years, and then moved back to Minnesota and worked at the Bayport plant and had a long career there. Worked in engineering, worked in operations support, and then that's where I actually got into lean. And it was interesting how I got into lean. And I think it was the year 2000, we were going to launch our lean initiative. And so our senior vice president called probably 100 of operations folks into a conference room and announced that we're going to be launching this lean initiative. We're going to bring in a couple consultants. We're going to do some Kaizen events and get going. And that was great. Went back to my office, and later that afternoon, 5 of us support managers got paged to a conference room and was told that as part of the lean rollout, we're flattening the organization and your jobs are all eliminated effective today.
Oh,
and so
we
didn't lose our employment, but now we were lean leaders.
Oh,
okay. So,
okay, there's the end of the story. Okay.
And I can't remember if I knew what 5S was then. You know, I mean, we were unfamiliar with lean, but over the next 12 months, they signed us up for some training. We got lean certified, and we started our initiative, our initiative, and kind of kept it going for quite a while.
Nice.
So, lots of great experience at Anderson Windows. Then, when I left there, I worked for a lean consulting company. It was PDG. I believe they're called Lean Partners today. And I worked there for 2 years. And that was also a great experience because I got exposed to lean in a lot of different environments other than manufacturing, like service industry, healthcare, printing, even government. I did a bunch of Kaizens at the state of Minnesota. So that was really a good experience. And then after that, I went to work for RMS Company, part of Cretex Medical. And so my last 15 years was for Cretex Medical, 2 different companies, Juno Pacific, and which is now part of CDT, and an RMS company. So,
So there you go.
That's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Thank you for the synopsis. There's a lot there. I mean, I want to ask you about government efficiency, but I won't. It's kind of a hot topic these days.
It is.
We'll talk about 5S and specifically as it relates to how to make it stick. For those listeners that don't know, what is 5S?
Okay, so literally, it's it's sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. But it's really a lot more than that. It's kind of I see it as a foundational lean tool that a lot of companies will kind of kick off their lean initiative with, because it's easy. I mean, it's easy to understand the concept. People like working in a clean environment, and
right.
It's easy, but it's still, there's a lot of complexity to it when you get to the sustainment part, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in detail.
Yeah, I mean, let's get there. I wanted to ask you a benefits question first. Okay. I mean, oftentimes what I've seen, and I would say, there's some good and some concern related to what I've seen over the years, where people will start with saying, okay, we're going to do this, and then they'll brag about how much stuff they throw away and how many dump trucks. And I'm like, okay, like that's okay. But there's also some problems with that too, like if that's where it stops. So that's maybe one side of the impact that's just okay. Can you tell me about the impact that you've seen that is really worth bragging about?
Well, first of all, safety. It has a huge impact on safety because a clean environment, less trip hazard, less slip hazards. If you think about industries I've worked in, where we've had resin spills, and resin is a slip hazard, and machine oil on the floor is a slip hazard, and clutter is a slip hazard. Things laying on the floor that are tripping hazards and so on. So it will have a huge impact on safety, but even quality and productivity. The question I always like to ask people, it doesn't matter if it's office people or government people or service people or manufacturing people. Have you ever had to search for anything you need to do your job? And when I ask that question, I'll kind of get some eye rolls, and people will laugh, and I'll say, well, so maybe like once a day or once a week, and then they'll really laugh because,
you got me
quite
laughing.
frankly, people look for stuff to do their job, and it has a huge impact on productivity. But a lot of people don't think of it that way because they just see that as part of their job. So it has a big impact on that. But some of the secondary benefits would be impressing your customers or impressing potential customers. We always enjoyed new potential customers coming in, and the one thing we always wanted to do is get them out on the floor where they could see our environment, and so that can have a big impact as well.
Those are all great. The trips and the slips and minimizing those, and then the searching component, impressing customers. Absolutely love that. I mean, I remember at one point in time, I was involved in an exercise where we even busted out a stopwatch. Someone would throw out a file that you should use, and you should know where it is, and we would see how long it takes and say, can you find that in under a minute or not? And that was the standard at the time. It was kind of a fun exercise.
Yeah, and you mentioned a file. So it's not just manufacturing; it's in the office. How much time do you spend looking for a file, or how cluttered up is the network, or your databases? And go into a hospital or a clinic and just watch the staff run around looking for things that they need to do their job. Yeah, it has a huge impact on productivity.
Yeah, the more we can just put stuff at our fingertips, the better. Okay, so then there's going to be a lot of people listening, just chomping at the bit regarding this next question because they want to start. They're already sold. They already want to do it. And they probably have resources to do it. But where should they start?
Yeah, so they should start small. They should pick an area. I mean, it might be a machine, or it might be a machining center or a group of machines or an assembly line, or maybe a room where a certain type of work is done. So keep it small, but also strategically pick your team. Pick somebody. In every environment, there's going to be organization cleanliness gurus, okay? But they may not have ever heard of 5S. In fact, a good example is I have a cousin that lives in Detroit Lakes, and he's an HVAC contractor, and he works he's a sole employee, right? And I went up and visited him a few years ago, and I said, show me around. He's had a whole bunch of outbuildings because he builds his own ducts and duct work and all that.
Yep.
And as I went through his buildings, I absolutely could not believe what I was seeing. It was everything was so perfectly organized. And I said, have you ever heard of 5S? No, what's that? And I kind of explained it, but he's the poster child for 5S. And there's people like that in our organizations.
Yeah.
And so if you can find a person like that really can dive deep into cleaning an organization and then get a team together, it can be a lot of fun. You can clearly see results very quickly. So take it small, strategically pick your team,
Yep.
and then get going on it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. As it relates to that area that you pick, that's a relatively small area in scope and likely size. I like the saying or the reference to the Titanic and rearranging the chairs in the Titanic. Like, if you know the ship's going down, don't worry about the order of the chairs, right? Get off. And so I think about that when implementing 5S. Make sure that we pick an area that's strategic and driving sustainable, profitable growth in the area so that we can build on success. And so that's one thought process that I have that I think kind of aligns with what you're talking about. What's another really intentional area to pick or thought process behind the target area so that people can pick an area strategically?
Probably maybe pick an area that's highly visible to other employees. And because you want to make this a showcase, you want to define what good looks like to the rest of the organization. And the other thing I should mention is start small, but go deep in that small area. So you do your sort, you do your straighten, and you clean everything. But it's not just the items. It's the floor, the ceiling tiles. Are they stained? Are they missing? Are they broken? How about holes in the walls? How about the tape on the floor? How about the shelves and racking? Get a fresh coat of paint. So go deep on the area you're doing to set a standard that you can bring the rest of your employees and say, this is what good looks like.
Perfect.
And we'll start here. What's our next area?
Yep. Do you need to improve flow and efficiency and want to use 5S to do it? Avoid the high cost of hiring an external consultant and do what our top members do. Develop your own internal champion by enrolling them in our Lean Practitioner certification. Click the link in the show notes to learn when our next certification starts. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question then about the people side of it too. You said, find someone that's the poster child. What other behaviors or characteristics might we find or see in team members that are ideal?
People who are influential to the other employees, maybe a senior employee or an employee that other employees just look up to, and a well-respected employee. And we should mention also that leadership should be involved with this. Now, depending on the size of the company, I've seen presidents out with their sleeves rolled up in blue jeans, cleaning and sorting on a 5S event. So that goes a long way as far as what what the other employees are going to see.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that actually just answered the next question that I wanted to throw at you, but there's other facets to this one too. So let's just keep building. Sure. How do you make sure that 5S isn't this one-time event?
Yeah, we could do a podcast on that, right? The key word there is event. And what companies need to strive toward is to not have it be an event, but have it be a process. So you start out with an event, but then you have to build a process around that, for the sustainment part. We all know sustainment is the hardest part of lean. And sustainment, without sustainment, things are just going to slip back into the old ways. And any other lean tool that you're going to implement, whether it's root cause analysis or problem solving or setup and changeover reduction, all those other lean tools are discipline dependent. Mm-hmm. And so to prevent slipping back into old habits, standard work has to develop, check sheets, audit sheets. That part has to be done. Otherwise, it will turn into a one-time event and slip back.
Check sheets, audit sheets. Really appreciate it. Great ideas. Maybe we could make some of those available to download for people that listen to this episode. Okay, so then what do you do to make sure that you don't overcomplicate it? In my experience, some people will do these really complex spider web sustainment metrics. And next thing I know, they're just caught up in arguments about what is a 3 on this audit sheet. And I'm like, okay, I get the intention behind it, but I think we overdid it here. How can we get, back on track? So what have you seen and how do you avoid overcomplicating it?
Well, I've seen exactly what you just described. Okay, where maybe there's 5 questions for sort and 5 questions on an audit form and 5 questions for set and order and then 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 of each one of those. People are not going to be on board with that type of audit system. So, to avoid overcomplicating it, we need to keep the standards clear, and the team should define the standards. And probably in a lot of cases, employees will be more stringent on standards than even management might be because they want to work in a clean environment. So keep things clear. How often do we need to clean the equipment, and how often do we need to do the floor, and how often, what are the frequencies, and define them. Keep it very clear and easy to understand. Audit forms don't make complex audit forms. Keep them simple. At RMS, we had, I think there was 10 questions, and the answer to each question was yes or no. Are things are items put away in the correct location? Yes or no? It doesn't. It's simple to do. You can do an audit in 5 or 10 minutes, and then people will actually do it. The other thing with auditing is do it with a team. Never do an audit by yourself. Get people together, do audits with mixed backgrounds, because now you can learn from each other. If you and I went out and did an audit, you're going to see things that I'm not going to see, and I'm going to see things that you're not going to see.
Yep.
And so we learn together, and we keep tweaking our standards to what we want to accomplish.
I love that. I wanted to ask you about auditing the audit. One thing that I used to do is, as I would look and audit, I would purposefully not do something. And then when I would be auditing, the auditor would get audited. I would see, or are they going to find it? So it'd be a mole.
Oh, okay. Sure.
It's kind of cynical. I kind of got I enjoyed it because I wanted to see if our system and our process was good enough to catch it, to say, okay, did we meet the standard? And so that was just one thing that, that was a decent practice.
Sure.
Wouldn't do it
you can have some
time.
fun with it.
Yeah. 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 There was no punishment. We're just checking the process. That's all. Yep. Anything
Yes.
else you want to add to that one?
So you can make the simple audit forms, and you can create standard work or clear 5S standards.
Yeah.
But that's still not going to make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you still got the discipline part, and every work environment. I mentioned every work environment has cleanliness and organizational type gurus, but they also have the opposite.
There's
right?
a few names for that too.
And it's not that they're bad employees.
Right.
It's just that they have different work habits, and discipline and sustainment is about changing behaviors. And that's difficult. Anybody who has ever tried to start a new good habit or break a bad old habit knows how hard it is to create a new habit. And that's what we're trying to do is create a habit.
Yeah. So I think one way to reinforce and build the habit is to link 5S to actual improvement that helps an individual like fix what bugs them. I couldn't find it. Now I can find it. Why don't we keep it that way? It's better for you. Sounds good to me. I've just heard a million of those conversations. How else have you seen 5S be strategically linked to drive continuous improvement?
I think it just kind of is linked just based on the fact that 5S is an improvement, and continuous improvement is such a huge umbrella. 5S is one lean tool that when you do it, it falls under that continuous improvement umbrella. And 5S tends to be part of any other type of continuous improvement. Do a setup and changeover Kaizen event, guarantee a 5S will be part of one of the actions that they take to improve that. And we go back a long way with the certification program and the hundreds and hundreds of people at Cretex Medical that have went through it. I can't count how many of those A3s had 5S as one piece of the overall improvement that they made. So, it kind of naturally comes with lots of different types of improvements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good call out. That's a really good call out. Okay, so anything else you want to add as it relates to making 5S stick? Otherwise, I got one last question for you. Here it is.
Okay.
What has been the best aspect of your career as an OE leader now that you are in retirement mode?
I think the best aspect for me is all the support and engagement that I've got from all the teams I've worked with. Being an operational excellence or lean, whatever you want to call it, lean leader can be a pretty stressful, difficult position if you don't have the right support and leadership. And you've been involved with us long enough to know how that looks at the companies I've worked for. But that certainly has made my job fun and so much easier because we have that support and engagement. And I'm kind of I'd call myself a people person. And so I always like to spend a lot of time on the production floor, talking to employees about their improvements, and it helps the morale. Employees feel good, they're engaged, and that's probably the most rewarding and fulfilling part of my job,
Gary,
in my career.
You have had an amazing career. I'm honored that you would share a few things with me here on the podcast about it, specifically then as it relates to 5S and making sure that it sticks. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I'm Kirby Snee with the Manufacturers Alliance, and this is the How Manufacturers Improve podcast. If you liked learning these high-level best practices from experienced peers, and you want your team to be able to access more in-depth process improvement and leadership training and education, I'd invite your company to become a member of the Manufacturers Alliance. To learn how top manufacturers are using their Manufacturers Alliance membership to develop their people, improve processes, and get better results, go to mfrall.com or just click the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.